This is the story of a ruthless group that has caused havoc in this region of Africa for years. Kindly subscribe to our channel. The Lord's Resistance Army insurgency is a conflict involving the Lord's Resistance Army against the government of Uganda. Following the Ugandan Civil War, militant Joseph Kony formed the Lord's Resistance Army and launched an insurgency against the newly installed President Yoweri Museveni. The stated goal was to establish a Christian state based on the Ten Commandments. Currently, there is low-level LRA activity in eastern areas of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Central African Republic. Kony proclaims himself the spokesperson of God and a spirit medium. It became one of Africa's longest conflicts and has resulted in a humanitarian crisis. The LRA has been accused by the International Criminal Court of widespread human rights violations, including mutilation, torture, slavery, rape, the abduction of civilians, the use of child soldiers, and a number of massacres. By 2004, the LRA had abducted more than 20,000 children, caused the displacement of 1.5 million civilians, and killed an estimation of 100,000 civilians. Background: the National Resistance Army, NRA, commanded by Yoweri Museveni, overthrew President Tito Okello in January 1986. In retaliation for the Ugandan Army's actions in the Luwero Triangle, the NRA committed numerous acts of brutality against the Ekoli. Fearing the loss of their customary dominance over the national military, some Ekolis rebelled. By August, the northern districts held by the new government forces had erupted into a full-fledged popular insurrection. Early history, 1987 to 1994. In January 1987, Joseph Kony made his first appearance as a spirit medium, one of many who emerged following the initial success of the Holy Spirit movement of Alice Amma. Former Uganda People's Democratic Army commander Odong Latek convinced Kony to adopt conventional guerrilla warfare tactics, primarily surprise attacks on civilian targets, such as villages. The LRA also occasionally carried out large-scale attacks to underline the inability of the government to protect the populace. Until 1991, the LRA raided the populace for supplies, which were carried away by villagers who were abducted for short periods of time. The fact that some NRA units were known for their brutal actions ensured that the LRA were given at least passive support by segments of the Ekoli population. March 1991 saw the start of Operation North, which combined efforts to destroy the LRA while cutting away its roots of support among the population through heavy-handed tactics. As part of Operation North, Ekoli Betty Oyella Bigam, the minister charged with ending the insurgency, created the Arrow Boys, a local militia mostly armed with bows, arrows, and other traditional weapons as a form of local defense. As the LRA was armed with modern weaponry, the Arrow Boys were severely underpowered. The creation of the Arrow groups angered Kony, who began to feel that he no longer had the support of the population. In response, the LRA mutilated numerous Ekoli whom they believed to be government supporters. While the government efforts were a failure, the LRA reaction caused many Ekoli to finally turn against the insurgency. However, this was tempered by the deep-seated antagonism towards the occupying government forces. Following Operation North, Bigam initiated the first face-to-face meeting between representatives of the LRA and the government. The LRA asked for a general amnesty for their combatants and stated that they would not surrender but were willing to return home. However, the government's stance was hampered by disagreement over the credibility of the LRA negotiators and political infighting. In particular, the military had learned that Kony was negotiating with the Sudanese government for support while talking to Bigam and felt that Kony was simply trying to buy time. At a second meeting on January 10, 1994, Kony asked for 6 months to regroup his troops. By early February the tone of the negotiations was growing increasingly acrimonious, and following a meeting on February 2, the LRA broke off negotiations stating that they felt that the NRA was trying to entrap them. 4 days later, President Yoweri Museveni announced a 7-day deadline for the LRA to surrender. This ultimatum ended the Bigam initiative. Spillover into neighboring countries, 1994 to 2002. 2 weeks after Museveni delivered his ultimatum of February 6, 1994, it was reported that LRA fighters had crossed the northern border and established bases in southern Sudan with the approval of the Khartoum government. Sudanese aid was a response to Ugandan support for the rebel Sudan People's Liberation Army, SPLA, fighting in the civil war in the south of the country. Also, convinced that the Akoli were now collaborating with the Museveni government, Kony began to target civilians with his increased military strength. Mutilations became commonplace, especially cutting off ears, lips, and nose, and 1994 saw the first mass abduction of children and youth. The most infamous of these was the Abok abductions of 139 female students in October 1996. As most of the LRA combatants are abducted children, a military offensive against the LRA is widely perceived by the Akoli as a massacre of victims. Government attempts to destroy the rebels are thus viewed as another cause for grievance by the Akoli. The moral ambiguity of this situation, in which abducted young rebels are both the victims and perpetrators of brutal acts, is central to the conflicted attitudes of many Akoli towards the rebels. The government's response was a scorched earth policy ordering all Akolis to leave their homes in 48 hours and move to protected villages beginning in 1996, later called internally displaced people's camps. This further deepened the antagonistic attitude that many Akoli had toward the government, especially as the population continued to be attacked by the LRA even within the protected camps. The camps were crowded, unsanitary, miserable places to live and have been described as death camps. World Health Organization data indicated that these camps caused the death of 10 times as many people as the LRA. Meanwhile, in 1997 the Sudanese government of the National Islamic Front began to recede from its previous hardline stance. Following the September 11, 2001 attacks in the US, the relationship between Sudan and Uganda abruptly changed. Cross-border tensions eased as support to proxy forces fell. Some of the hundreds of thousands of civilians displaced by the war began to return home. The number of people displaced by the conflict declined to about 500,000, and people began to talk openly about the day when the protected camps would be disbanded. In March 2002, the Uganda People's Defense Force, UPDF, launched a massive military offensive, named Operation Iron Fist, against the LRA bases in southern Sudan, with agreement from the National Islamic Front. This agreement, coupled with the return of Ugandan forces that were deployed in the Democratic Republic of Congo upon the official end of the Second Congo War, created what the Ugandan government felt was an ideal situation in which to end a conflict that had become both an embarrassment and political liability. After several months of uncertainty, LRA forces began crossing back into Uganda and carrying out attacks on a scale of brutality not seen since 1995 to 1996, resulting in widespread displacement and suffering in regions, such as Sorotai, that had never previously been touched by the insurgency. A series of local initiatives spearheaded by traditional and religious leaders as well as diplomatic initiatives during these years failed, especially since Kony's negotiating position remained uncertain, but the conflict gained unprecedented international coverage. During a November 2003 field visit to Uganda, United Nations Under-Secretary-General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Jan Egeland stated, "I cannot find any other part of the world that is having an emergency on the scale of Uganda, that is getting such little international attention." In December 2003, Ugandan President Museveni referred the LRA to the International Criminal Court, ICC, to determine if the LRA is guilty of international war crimes. From the middle of 2004 on, rebel activity dropped markedly under intense military pressure. The government was also the target of increasingly pointed criticism from the international community for its failure to end the conflict. International aid agencies questioned the Ugandan government's reliance on military force and its commitment to a peaceful resolution. The army also admitted that it had recruited child soldiers who escaped the LRA into the military. In mid-September 2005, a band of LRA fighters, led by Vincent Oddie, crossed into the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, for the first time. President Museveni declared that, if Congolese authorities did not disarm the LRA combatants, the UPDF would be sent across the border in pursuit. This sparked a diplomatic row between the governments of the DRC and Uganda, with both militaries making a show of force along their border, while the Congolese ambassador to the United Nations sent a letter to the UN Secretary-General demanding that an economic embargo be placed on Uganda in retaliation. Peace talks and truce, 2006 to 2008. A series of meetings were held in Juba starting in July 2006 between the government of Uganda and the LRA. The talks were mediated by Riek Machar, the Vice President of Southern Sudan, and by the community of Sant'Egidio. The talks, which resulted in a ceasefire by September 2006, were described as the best chance for a negotiated settlement since the peace initiative of Betty Bigam in 1994. These talks were agreed to after Joseph Kony released a video in May in which he denied committing atrocities and seemed to call for an end to hostilities, in response to an announcement by Museveni that he would guarantee the safety of Kony if peace was agreed to by July. In late June 2006, the government of Southern Sudan formally invited Uganda to attend peace talks, and on July 14, 2006, talks began in Juba. On August 4, 2006, Vincent Oddie declared a unilateral ceasefire and asked the Ugandan government to reciprocate. ICC Nditi Raskalukwiya was killed in battle on August 12, 2006. The government and the LRA signed a truce on August 26, 2006. Under the terms of the agreement, LRA forces will leave Uganda and gather in 2 assembly areas protected by the government of Sudan. The Ugandan government agreed not to attack those areas. LRA rebels had begun gathering in the assembly areas by mid-September. Talks continued to be hindered by demands and counter-demands. Meanwhile, the government began a process of creating satellite camps to decongest the main IDP camps. In a broader context, the government of Southern Sudan viewed the talks as a means of ridding itself of a foreign army that was complicating its delicate relationship with the Khartoum government. The request by the Ugandan government for the ICC to suspend war crimes indictments against leaders of the LRA was condemned by international human rights groups but largely supported by leaders and civilians within northern Uganda. By mid-2007, thousands of IDPs had moved into the decongestion camps. However, the populace remained cautious about the prospect of a peace deal, with many refusing to return to their ancestral homes before a definitive end to the insurgency. Following a period in which the peace talks were suspended, the Juba Initiative project enabled the resumption of the talks in May 2007, thanks to the efforts of the United Nations Special Representative of the Secretary-General for LRA-affected areas, Joachim Chissano. The talks were again mediated by the government of Southern Sudan, but with the support of the United Nations and logistic facilitation from the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA. On August 20, 2007, Uganda declared that it was seeking legal advice on setting up a war crimes court. In November 2007, an LRA delegation led by Martin Ojal journeyed to Kampala to restate its commitment to a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Ojal later led the delegation on a tour of northern Uganda to meet victims of the insurgency and ask their forgiveness. However, reports surfaced that LRA Deputy Commander Oddie had been executed on or around October 8, 2007 over an internal power struggle with Kony. In February 2008, LRA launched its first known attack in the Central African Republic in Bosigbarai, Otumbomu. In the next month, LRA raided the first major town in Otumbomu, Obio. In June 2008, diplomats reported that the Lord's Resistance Army had bought new weapons and was recruiting new soldiers, adding 1,000 recruits to the 600 soldiers it already had. At about the same time, Uganda, South Sudan, and Congo-Kinshasa agreed to a plan to crush the movement together. The South Sudanese claimed that the rebels killed 14 of their soldiers on June 7, 2008. The LRA was alleged to have killed at least 400 people in attacks on a number of villages in the DR Congo on and after Christmas Day, 2008. Throughout 2009, the LRA was blamed for several attacks in southern Sudan, DR Congo, and Central African Republic. In March 2010, news emerged about a December 2009 massacre in DR Congo perpetrated by the LRA. In May 2010, U.S. President Barack Obama signed the Lord's Resistance Army Disarmament and Northern Uganda Recovery Act into law. In October 2011, Obama announced the deployment of 100 U.S. troops to aid other anti-LRA forces in subduing LRA leader Joseph Kony, citing the aforementioned act in a letter to the heads of both houses of Congress. On March 23, 2012, the African Union announced its intentions to send an international brigade of 5,000 military troops from Uganda, South Sudan, Central African Republic, and Congo, countries where Kony's reign of terror has been felt over the years, to join the hunt for rebel leader Joseph Kony and to neutralize him. According to the statement, the mission would commence on March 24, 2012 and the search would last until Kony was caught, after which the task force would be disbanded. On May 12, 2012, Ugandan soldiers with the African Union Brigade captured a senior LRA leader in the Central African Republic, CAR, Caesar Akalum, a veteran rebel commander with the rank of Major General. Because he was a leading military strategist for the LRA, Akalum's arrest signified a considerable setback for Joseph Kony's fight to evade capture. On June 6, the UN Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, released an initial report covering the activities of the LRA from 2009 to 2012. The report itself stated that at least 45 children have been killed and maimed during this time period and at least 591 children, including 268 girls, have been abducted. Though it was noted by Radhika Kumaraswamy, the UN Special Representative on Children and Conflict, that the actual numbers of abductions are much higher, these are just the ones we are aware of. The report also stated that the LRA is currently made up of between 300 and 500 fighters, with around half of them being children 64-65. The LRA was reported to be in the East Car town of Jma in 2012, but forces pursuing the LRA withdrew in April 2013 after the government of the Car was overthrown by the Seleka coalition rebels. In November 2013, Kony was reported to be in poor health in the East Car town of Nzoka, and Michel Jotodia, president of the Car, claimed he was negotiating with Kony to surrender. U.S. officials doubted that Kony genuinely wanted to surrender. In early November 2013, suspected LRA militants attacked 5 villages in the western Equatoria region of South Sudan. 3 people were killed and 1 wounded. Aside from looting, the rebels also set fire to several houses. On December 4, 2013, 13 LRA militants including senior commander Samuel Kang were killed in the aftermath of a UPDF ambush in Car. The rebels were reportedly tracked with the aid of US-provided intelligence. On December 11, 2013, 19 LRA guerrillas surrendered to African Union troops in Zembio, Car. According to UN estimates, at least 65 LRA attacks took place in Car and DRC during the first quarter of 2014, during which 93 people were reportedly abducted and 2 killed. On May 7, 2014, United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon stated that senior LRA commanders were stationed in South Sudan's border areas with Sudan and the Central African Republic. On May 20, 2014, delegates from Uganda, DRC, South Sudan, and Car held a 3-day conference in South Sudan regarding the LRA insurgency. On August 13, 2014, LRA insurgents launched attacks on villages in the vicinity of Billy, DRC, killing 4 people and injuring 2. FARD troops clashed with the militants before the latter retreated. On August 23, 2014, 13 LRA hostages escaped from captivity. 6 days later 12 more hostages followed suit. The escapees were abducted between 2004 and August 2014, and managed to reach Digba and Ango, DRC, respectively, following a FARDC offensive. On January 9, 2015, LRA's second-in-command Dominic Ongwen surrendered to U.S. troops stationed in CAR. On January 15, 2015, LRA rebels conducted a number of kidnappings in the villages of Bulamasai and Pongali, Bondo Territory, DRC. A total of 10 people were taken hostage during the incident. On January 21, 2015, LRA militants killed 3 FARDC soldiers in the aftermath of an ambush conducted at the town of Nangyum in the vicinity of Wando, DRC. Dozens of civilians were wounded, 3 were abducted and 200 families were also displaced from the area following raids LRA militants. On February 5, 2015, a band of 20 suspected LRA guerrillas abducted 8 people and engaged in looting in the villages of Dizaga and Digba, DRC. On April 12, 2015, a total of 8 FARDC soldiers went missing in action, following a LRA ambush outside the Mangbanga village, DRC. An unidentified corpse was found in the area, a day after the incident. On March 30, 2017, the United States military announced it was ending its anti-LRA campaign, Operation Observant Compass. On an unspecified date in April 2017, a United States Special Forces soldier shot and killed an LRA fighter who drew a weapon on the American. The American had been escorting an African Union peacekeeper when the incident occurred. On April 19, 2017, Uganda announced that it would begin withdrawing forces from the Central African Republic, where it has been trying to hunt down Joseph Kony in the country for 9 years. On May 6, 2021, LRA commander Dominic Ongwen was sentenced to 25 years in Ugandan prison over war crimes and crimes against humanity in Uganda. The Invisible Children documentary sponsored the Global Night Commute, an event similar to Gila Walk. On April 29, 2006, over 80,000 youths from around the world converged on urban centers in 130 major cities around the world in solidarity with displaced Ugandan children. The Invisible Children organization also raised awareness for those in the internally displaced camps, IDPs, through its Displace Me event held in 15 cities across the U.S. on April 28, 2007. Over 68,000 people participated in the event, which required participants to sleep outside in homes made out of cardboard, similar to those in the IDPs. Another program, the Name Campaign, asks people to wear nameplate necklaces imprinted with the first name of one of the thousands of abducted children as a means of raising public awareness. Danny Glover and Don Cheadle have both been vocal advocates on behalf of the children of northern Uganda. On March 5, 2012, the Invisible Children organization posted the Kony 2012 video on YouTube, which was widely seen. As of March 22, 2023, the film had over 103 million views on video sharing website YouTube. Kindly subscribe to our channel.